Tell me if you find this familiar. You get a box of chocolates, you put them into your cupboard, and then after some time when you're just casually walking by this cupboard, you take out this box and eat just one tiny little chocolate, right? And then after some time when you were just passing by this cupboard, you once more open it and take another chocolate. Sounds familiar, anyone? Yeah, precisely. So if you're familiar with this, let's call it procedure, you know perfectly well what will happen eventually. At one point, you will put your hand inside this box just to realize with terror that there are no more chocolates left, right? You have eaten all box of chocolates without even realizing that. I used to do this a lot in the past. So this meeting was supposed to be about taming defects and things me and my team learned to do to keep the number of defects low. Why am I talking about chocolates? Well, the thing is, something pretty similar has happened to my team. But instead of eating chocolates, we were implementing ideas, small changes like tiny little steps towards automating something, or one small change towards how we were doing our procedures, our daily routines, and so on and so on. And after a longer period of time, we didn't even realize that we have implemented whole bucks of, well, not chocolates, obviously, but improvements. And the results were pretty astonishing, and let me show them to you. So in year 2019, my team got nearly 150 new defects reported. It's like 3 defects every week. It's impossible even to imagine such a flood of defects, right? So what happened then? The team asked for a Scrum Master. So in the fall of 2019, I joined this team, and together we started a journey full of changes and improvements. And the results were already visible the next year, because instead of having another 150 new defects, we got only half of this number. And we, of course, didn't stop there. We were continuing our journey. So last year, 2021, only 22 defects reported to my team. It's hard even to compare those numbers, right? So what precisely did we do to have such results? Well, we have implemented so many ideas and changes that it would be simply impossible for me to tell you about them all. So instead, I decided to pick those most significant ones to tell you about them. And just to make it easier to talk about them, I have divided them into 4 categories. So basically, this is our agenda for today. And let's make it into a game, okay? Those are 4 categories or changes. Could you guess what this first icon stands for? What kind of changes could those be? What can be related to? Any ideas? Documentation, something. Requirements, yeah, so basically this is how we prepare our task, right? Second category, this one will be pretty obvious, I think. Coding, yeah, so basically implementation of those tasks. The third one, yes, so we have code review and testing. And the last one, lessons learned. Thank you, Philip. Lessons learned indeed. Okay, so let's start with the first category. How did we change the way we prepare our tasks? Basically, we have implemented a proper refinement process. And what does proper mean? It means that it suits your team, because every team is different. So your refinement process may look totally different than ours, and it's okay as long as it suits you. So to tell you how it looks like now, I have to go back and tell you how did it look before the change. So at the beginning, someone with enough expertise in a given component would create a task and give it some initial description, or not, or leave it just empty, right? So it would wait in status open, and during the sprint planning meeting, whole team would look through the set of tasks that we have chosen for the sprint, you know, to ask some questions, get some answers, but we would often forget to write it down. So it was all talked about at the meeting. But then, during the sprint, when somebody was coding, he didn't know what to do. So therefore, we made a lot of defects due to lack of knowledge, because we didn't store this knowledge anywhere. So now, how did we change it? The beginning looks pretty similar. We have this one person that is, or many persons basically, who have enough expertise to create such task and give this initial description. And when this person believes that this task is ready, we mark it as a ready candidate. Why such strange name? Because, well, this guy believes it is ready, but he's not sure. He's the only person that has read his own description, right? So once every sprint, a few of our developers sit down together and look through all of those ready candidates. And if all the information needed is there, they simply must mark it as ready. But if something is still missing, they start a brief cooperation with the person that created this task just to fill in those missing data. So in the end, during the sprint, developers have all the information that they need to perform task effectively. It's stored in the description. Okay, so I'm talking about this description a lot, but you know perfectly well as I do that this is so hard to create a good description. How much should you write inside this description, right? Because you must add enough details so the developers will know what to do and understand what's the result, right? But if you add too much details, you will create a book instead of description, and it's so hard to get through such long descriptions. So at one point, we decided to create something that we called a story template. So right now, when you open Jira and click this create button on the top, and this pop-up window would appear with all those details, right, fields to fill in, the field description is pre-populated with such template. So we are still having place for proper description, right? But next to it, we've got some other places. And key ones are these. Scope of changes, because sometimes it is very obvious that you have to do change here. But it's so easy to forget that you have to do similar implementation over here, right? So we have it written down. Affected areas. So we made those changes here, but something affected might be over there. So you also want to go there and check whether it is still working or did it change the way it works, and it shouldn't have, right? So affected areas. And last but not least, testing. What should be tested after this implementation or during this implementation? How, when, where, and so on and so on. So all the details needed to perform proper testing. And in the end, it is really difficult to forget about something if you have this structured, easy to follow description. We just know what to do. So to sum up this first category, how we change the way we prepare our tasks. We have a proper working refinement process. We're having good descriptions, and having a template is very, very useful to having those. Now let's move to the second category. What did we change in the way we are implementing our tasks? First of all, pair programming. Yuta yesterday said so many good things about pair programming, so I will just say that in my team, due to some characteristics of our product, it is not very easy to do pair programming. We don't have many occasions to do it because we are not coding as much as we would like to. So, not to miss any occasion to do it, during the sprint planning meeting, we have this moment when we look at the set of tasks that we have chosen, and we marking every task that is available for pair programming with this PP label, because we don't want to miss this chance. And the gains are pretty obvious, right? If you have two heads looking at the same code instead of one, then you won't have as many typical human mistakes. But also, if you have many people looking at the same code, then you are reducing the effect of bottlenecks, and you're spreading the knowledge all over the team. And this spreading the knowledge was very, very crucial for us, because most of those 150 defects in the year 2019 were caused by lack of knowledge, because we only have few developers with enough expertise, and the rest of them were newcomers. So they have to learn still, right? What do we do with our components, how to maintain them, and so on and so on. And at one point, we realized that we have a bunch of tasks that are repeatable. We have to do them over and over again, but they are difficult to be automated. So we started preparing very short how-to articles on Confluence. Whenever someone was doing such task, while he was doing it, he would write down just few steps, like few lines of description, how to perform it correctly. And he would save it in our Confluence knowledge base. So after a few sprints, we basically have this knowledge base with very short and easy to follow guidelines. But we didn't stop there because we wanted to make sure that those descriptions are good enough, right? So we started adding lists of our developers to most of those how-to articles. And whenever someone was implementing such task using these guidelines, he would simply mark his name. So after another few sprints, we were sure that those articles are clear, understandable, and right now, every team member could perform all of those repeatable tasks if needed, because now he knows why. So once again, we are reducing the bottleneck effect, and we are also spreading the knowledge, and so on. And now we have come to my favorite change that we have created in our team, which was fostering and maintaining culture of help, support, and cooperation. Of course, in Jira, you can have only one assignee per task, right? Obviously. But in my team, whole team feels responsible for every single task that we have in our sprint. So whenever someone stumbles upon some problems, has some questions, he simply typed it on our team chat and he gets answers immediately. Like a flood of support is coming in. And if his problem is too complex to just ask at Google Chat, we usually whole team stays after the daily meeting to discuss it deeply. So when this developer is resuming his work, he knows that he's choosing the best possible solution because he has the knowledge combined from all the team. And I must say that for me, as for Scrum Master, to just observe how they are cooperating, how are they supporting one another, this is pure pleasure. I could just sit all day long, eat popcorn, and look how they are cooperating. So it helps us a lot to decrease number of defects caused by lack of knowledge because it's being shared so widely. To summarize the second category, what did we change in the way we are doing our tasks? We are doing pair programming as much as possible, in our case at least. We're sharing the knowledge in every possible way that is suitable for us, especially by those knowledge bases. And also we have developed this culture of help, cooperation, and support. Let's move to the third category. How did we change the way we are doing code review and testing? And let's start with something, well, that sounds pretty strange, right? High independency of tests and code review. So what is it and where does it come from? You might remember from your school years that when you got a homework and you have done it, you have checked every line of it, right? You're sure there are no mistakes. Then you give it to your teacher, and what happens next? You still can find some mistakes in your homework, right? But why? Because when we are checking our own work, our brain tricks us, and we're checking our perfect image of it that we have in our minds instead of actual work. So it's really difficult to find mistakes in your own work. So how do we do it right now? This test independency means that if some developer is doing the code, then someone else is doing the review and testing. And if this other person is doing coding, then somebody else should be doing testing and code review. So those are independent things, right? And thanks to this, we are way more effective in finding our own mistakes. Now let's talk about changes that were the hardest to implement because they required tremendous amount of work. So number one here is automating what could be automated, especially testing. Obvious gain here is that we are reducing the time, right, needed to deliver something. But another thing is that if you do automated tests, then each time you run them, you know that this thing was tested thoroughly, the way it should be tested. But if you're doing this manually, you might simply miss something, right? Number 2 here is having pre-installed test environments for manual testing. Why is it connected with numbers of defects in our team? Well, the thing is that our environments are very difficult to be configured. It would require few hours or one day even sometimes to configure environment manually. Waste of time, of course, but if something is so complicated to be prepared, then you most likely will make some mistakes during doing it, right? So then on misconfigured environments, we simply might not see our defects because this will work in different way. So having those always ready to go pre-installed test environments helps us to find more mistakes before they become defects visible to our clients. And the third number here is environment emulators. So basically stuff that simulates components from outside of our teams. Why do we need it? To increase our test coverage. Because now having those test emulators, we can test interfaces between our components and components from outside of our team. And also at one point, without even talking about it and realizing it, we started using our sprint review as a last gate of quality. Sounds strange, right? So what does it mean? During this demonstration of working increments, when one person is doing this demonstration, all other developers are listening actively. And from time to time, someone will have this aha moment like, guys, and did we remember too? Or, and what would happen if? And listening activity and having such moments of aha, we find mistakes in designing solutions before they hit our customers, so we can still fix it before it's visible to anyone. So to sum up this third category, we are focusing on independency of testing and code review. We are also having as much automated tests as possible, having pre-installed test environments and emulators. And we are using our sprint review as a last gate of quality. So it's time to talk about last improvement that we made. We started doing lessons learned, but it's embedded in our processes. So fun fact, if you would ask any of my team members, guys, do you have lessons learned? They would probably say, no, we're not doing such things, because it's so hidden in our procedures that we're doing it without even naming it lessons learned. How does it look? We start at our sprint review, and I'm talking about team level sprint review, because we have scaled version of Scrum. We also have this additional meeting scaled version of review where the stakeholders are present and the representatives from different teams, right? But here I'm talking about our team level sprint review. We have there a filter called later resolved defects and support cases. So we look through all of those support cases and defects that we have resolved this sprint and ask ourselves 3 questions. Could we have avoided it? Could we have found it earlier? And can we avoid having similar problems in the future? And if the answer to any of those 3 questions is positive, then we take this topic to our sprint retrospective meeting, when we think about some actions and conclusions that will prevent us from having same or similar problems in the future. And such action could be add another point to one of our checklists, or automate something, right? Or write another how-to article, or whatever makes it possible for us to avoid doing the same mistake. So thanks to this, we're, well, basically not having duplicates in the future. Okay, so let's wrap up all of those things that we have changed. Number 1 here, how we prepare our tasks. We're doing refinement, description, story template. Number 2 was how we are changing the way we are doing stuff, right? How we are implementing our tasks. Pair programming, sharing knowledge, knowledge bases, and having this culture of help and cooperation. Third category was about how we are testing and reviewing our code. And we have this high independency, automating what could be automated, sprint review as a final gate of quality. And last category was lessons learned as a part of the process, something you're doing constantly, not from occasion to occasion. And now you're probably looking at this. Oh my, so many changes. How could any team afford sticking it somewhere to the backlog? It's impossible, right? How can you, I don't know, just stop doing your work and start improving everything? It's impossible. But here's when we have to go back to our box of chocolates. Because if you could just take one tiny little change every sprint, like one story point, right? Or at maximum 2 story points it could cost, then, well, it won't influence your capacity in a way that would be visible to your stakeholders. They simply won't realize that you're something more. It might be frustrating to you at first, because how much can you automate when you have just one story point to spend? It's not much. But after some time, those changes will eventually accumulate into something visible and beautiful that will improve your work greatly. That's all from me right now. Thank you for your attention. And now we have over 15 minutes before the dinner is served. So I'm here to answer all of your questions. Who want to go first? Okay.
I want to ask about the culture. Was that natural for the developers from your team to help each other, and how did you implement that?
At the beginning it looked typical, right? Me, my task, the rest of the world. But at one point we changed the way we were doing our daily stand-ups, and this was a true game changer. So instead of doing normal rounds, I did this, I will do this, and yeah, I have to leave for 1 hour today. No, we don't do this anymore. Instead, we are looking together at our Kanban board, and we go through it from right to left. So we are looking, for example, on column blocked, which is nearly at the end of our board, and ask ourselves, can we unblock some task? Can we move it to open? Then we are walking through the board, and we have the next column is things that are waiting for the build. Can we build something together? Who can do this? Who will do the testing of this build? So we are having this strategy meeting rather than a normal stand-up, right? Then we are looking at tasks that are waiting for code review. Who can do the code review today? Okay, who else can help with it? All right, let's move forward. Tasks that are in progress. Can anyone help somebody, or does anyone need any answers or discussion, or is stuck with something, and so on and so on. So instead of you looking at your task only, we are looking at our set of tasks, and those are our challenges, our problems, and our success at the end of the sprint.
Thank you.
Thanks. Who's next?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. First of all, congratulations. It's very impressive.
Thanks.
Man, yeah, I'm honest. Yeah, but I have a question about this template. That's really interesting.
Okay.
Do you consider this entire list as something that is mandatory, or it is kind of guidance for somebody who's need to write it?
Yeah, so at the beginning we thought that it should be mandatory, of course, right? It's the obvious choice, but okay, where is this template? But of course we realized at one moment that sometimes it doesn't help. The easiest example, repeatable task. Everything is in the Confluence. Why should you bother implement this here as well? Sometimes we feel that something else should be written here instead of following this description. So it's more like guidelines, right? So normally we have this template and we use it. Sometimes we don't. We just choose what is more suitable at this very moment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. So one question, you mentioned that by taking very little of those improvements into the sprint, your stakeholders wouldn't even notice. So myself, I'm a big believer in full transparency and talking to our business people in order to make them understand how those improvements will help instead of hiding them somewhere underneath the table. So I wanted to ask whether this idea of trying to hide the improvements came from the pushback from the business that the business didn't give you enough time to implement those improvements, or
Yeah.
was it just the first instinct that this
Okay,
is not
good call.
future work, so we need to hide it?
Right. So let's try a different way. When we deliver something like we automated this bunch of tests, we definitely are showing this to our stakeholders to let them know, right? But what I meant that they won't realize, it's not that we want to hide it because it's something wrong with they cannot see it. No, it's that it won't influence their plans because they are waiting for something to get it somewhere in the time, right? So this won't be a risk for them. So this is what I meant. But thank you for showing me that I didn't choose my words wisely. Did it answer your question?
So, hi.
Hi.
Can you tell a bit about the process, how you discovered all of those things and how eventually you make it happen?
Yeah, it's called retrospective meeting.
I believe so.
So basically, during retrospectives, right, we are looking at things that are bothering team the most. And thanks to this, we're attacking those bottlenecks, right? Those places with the biggest mess that requires the much attention. So we're starting there, and we're just thinking, just as Eva said, what might be the cause, what might help. And we just try and experiment. That's the key. Yeah, especially regarding this refinement process, we tried like 4 or 5 approaches to doing it, and most of them were total failures. But we didn't stop, of course. We were experimenting still, and at last we found this process that suits our team. Just don't give up and move on. Yeah, no, it's easy to say it, right? Failures upward during the process? That depends on the situation. Basically, if we are thinking about trying something, I always say out loud, let's try it. And if it doesn't work, we simply stop doing it and just try something else that will help us, right? But the motivation is already there because we are attacking those places that are the most troublesome for the team. So they want to change it. So I never try to, poke the team, hey, let's fix this if this is not bothering them, because there is no motivation. But if something is bothering, like, okay, this is 3rd time that we forgot to implement changes somewhere. Okay, now this is the moment to think about how to avoid it in the future, right? So I'm looking for these opportunities where the motivation is already there.
I have a question about this additional role during the refinement, or maybe not a role, because I'm not totally sure that it's a role, but the person who is responsible for
This one?
For this ready to prepare material to change to ready to ready candidate.
So
for
these guys
implementation.
here, right?
I'm not totally sure, but you mentioned that there is one person who taking a task feature, and this person is preparing this material for the team. How you resolve this new role?
It's not a new role, really. I mean, we've got many components, right? So there are people that know the of the team about this component. So when we have something to do in this given component, let's call him subject matter expert, will create this task, right? So this is his role, but it's not an official role that you have to create all our tasks. Basically, every team member can create a task, and then product owners prioritize it, right? But of course, we're creating them with coordinates with product owner, right? because we are having this culture of help and cooperation also regarding to creating tasks.
Okay, thank you for that, because I know that, for example, the developers, they don't like to create tasks in Jira and put all acceptance criteria or necessary things. That's why it's difficult to, to find the person
they
who
learn
is
that it's
responsible for that.
helpful.
That's why I just want to ask you about that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.